the Levaya of the great Rosh Yeshiva, the Varan Kotler, V'chayin Levracha, the Satmar Rebbe appeared, and his voice was choked with tears. It was barely audible as he tried to say something about Reb Arin, and finally he cried out the Rashi in this week's Sedra. V'yaskein aharin el mul pnei ha-menorah, Helen Erisel Kashetziva Hashem Esmoishes. Dr. Rashi, why does the pasuk stress this? V'yaskein aharin, that indeed Aaron went ahead and lit the menorah, L'hagid shevrachi shel Aaron, to teach us the praise of Aharon Shaloshina, that he did not change, he did not deviate from the instructions that were given to him as to how to light the menorah. So of course the question is obvious. Would anyone have a hava meaning that Aaron HaKohen would deviate from the instructions that were given to him? Is this the shvach of Aaron, that he followed instructions? The Satmar Rebbe said, referring to Reb Aaron, on a play of words, Magid shvachei shel Aaron shaloshina. He came to America and transplanted the Mesiras Nefesh for Limud HaTorah in this country. He didn't deviate one iota from the way it was in Klesk, from the way it was in Bavel, from the way it was when you didn't learn Torah in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, he refused to allow his commitment to Torah and his demand from others to commit themselves to Torah to be changed in any way, regardless of the burning world, the culture shock of a brand new continent that boasted over here the streets are treif. Aaron HaKohen did not change. And the purpose of lighting the menorah instilled the Kedushas HaTorah and the Emunah into Klal Yisrael. So Rashi is telling us, L'hagid shvachei shel Aaron shaloshina. Aaron HaKohen lit the menorah in such a way, to the Kedusha of Aaron there was such Emunah, such a feeling for Yiddishkeit that spread out to the people, to the hearts of the people, that it was embedded with them in a way that you couldn't change it. It wasn't fazed by the changing sceneries of life. I once heard from a Yid a rather frightening thought. He said in his small town, people were generally Erlich, you had the Tehillim Yidden, you had Shmir Shabbos. I mean, after all, there was no other life. There was just a Jewish ghetto, little children raised amongst Erlich Yidden. And then one day they heard a noise. People were laying tracks through the town. And a couple of weeks later, everyone gathered to watch the phenomenal sight of the steam locomotive roared through the town. This year told me you should know the town was never the same afterwards. When the steam cleared, so was the pure Yiras Shamayim of the people. Suddenly there was an urge to see what's out there. There was a curiosity to know, what is this world about? There is something else. And he told me that you should know in his town it was mamish weeks afterwards that the Haskalah set in. You had your Bundist movements, you had your Zionist movements, your communist movements, and suddenly Torah became almost completely non-existent. The emes is that those things happen today also, Rahman al-Islam, Bavaniseinu Arabim, in many different ways. There are so many vehicles of entertainment under the guise of education, under the guise of productivity, under the guise of it's needed today. It can be brought into a house, and the first time the child sees it, and the first time his enthusiasm grows and his imagination is captured, so suddenly the Gemara becomes a very meaningless thing to him. And it's not just little children, it's big children also, very big children. It's the child within us, the child within adults that are 20, 30, or 40 years old. We are always vulnerable to be overwhelmed by suddenly something that strikes our fancy, and there is this danger, the same danger of what happened to that town when the locomotive rode through it. But the emes is getting back to this town that lost its Yiddishkeit the first time the train roared through. The truth is that this town was vulnerable from the start. Obviously, the limud HaTorah in this town, the appreciation for tefillah and davening, had to have been lacking to start with. In other words, had the mechanchim of that town, had the era allowed itself for the mechanchim of that town, if there were mechanchim in that town, instilled a love for Yiddishkeit, for Torah, for avodah, for tefillah, for gemilas chesed, had it not just been something that you had to do because there was nothing else to do, then no train in the world could have pierced it. And perhaps there was another nekuda here as well. Had the children of this town been taught that there is a world out there, and this is the Torah Deka Hashkafa of the world, This is how you're to associate yourself with the world. Al pi das Torah. This is your view. This is your attitude. This is the idea that you're supposed to project into that world. Then maybe when the train first came by, they would have viewed it as an opportunity instead of what they considered an enlightenment, which of course is an oxymoron. It was exactly the opposite. So this is all part of the message of Magid Shvachei Shalarein Shaloishina. When Aaron HaKohen kindled the menorah, he was mashpia, a simcha into the hearts of Klal Yisrael, an encouragement, a feeling of emunah, a proudness to be a Yid, so that Shaloishina, the Yid didn't change, even later when he encountered difficulties, even later when he was out of the environment of the Ananei HaKavod, and there no longer was any man that was falling from Shemayim in a clear fashion. There wasn't any Ber Shel Miriam to drink emunah from. But you have to toil the land, you have to deal with the enemies around you. Shaloishina, Klal Yisrael didn't change. These locomotives had no bearing on them because of the way Aaron HaKohen lit the menorah. And clearly that is what the Satmar Rebbe Zechron Livracha meant when he said about Reb Aaron, Magid Shvachei Shalarein Shaloishina. He transplanted the love, admiration, and prestige of Torah into the locomotive, into the train stations of America. Of course, the classical explanation of Magid Shvachei Shalarein Shaloishina comes from the Kotzker Rebbe. I'm sure you have all seen the face of a bar mitzvah bacher, the very, very first time he's putting on tefillin, the look on his eyes, the face of a small 3-year-old as soon as he gets his payas, and the talus cotton is placed on him for the first time. If only we could maintain that same level of love and chiyus for a mitzvah throughout our lifetime. Who can? Aaron HaKohen did. Dr. Kotzker, that's what Rashi means when Rashi says, Lahagid Shvachei Shalarein Shaloishina, Aaron HaKohen never changed. The very, very first time he lit the menorah was the same as the 500th time he lit the menorah. One of the Lelev Rebbes left Eretz Yisrael to come to Europe because he wanted to see the Gedolim of Poland. He wanted to learn from them. It was a controversial move, but he felt that for him it was the right thing to do. And it was with extreme difficulty, both in terms of convincing his peers and in terms of the physical trip, that he finally made the long trek from Yerushalayim to Sams. And he wanted desperately to get there before Rosh Hashanah. He wanted to hear the Sams of Bracha and Kiyah Shofar. Well, he made it within the Tchum Shabbos of Sams before Rosh Hashanah. He was stuck someplace for the night, but he had some solace knowing that he would still be able to walk and may make it for the next day. And he finally made it to Sams, and he ran so desperately, not wanting to miss the Sams of Bracha and Kiyah Shofar, which he heard was so full of enthusiasm, so full of Kiddusha. And he ran up to the window and he saw the Sams of begin a Bracha. And he began, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. And when he set out the Shemus, there was such pachad, there was such year, it seems that the walls were shaking. And he looked and he stared and took a deep breath. This was worth it. It was worth the trip. Look at that Kiddusha. Look at that immense concentration. He's never seen anything like that. And the Sons of continued, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, and he began Asher Yotzar to Adam B'chacham. The Sons of was simply making an Asher Yotzar. That's what he noticed. The Bracha and Kiyah Shofar was yet to come. So Lelev Rebbe said, I thought I came to hear his Bracha and Kiyah Shofar. I came to hear his Asher Yotzar. In other words, every Bracha that he made was a traumatic experience. It was a connection between him and the Rebbeinu Shalom, Apasha Tazach. And that was the Magid Shvachei Shalarein Shaloishina. Whether he did it every day, whether he did it once a year, or whether he did it once in a lifetime, or whether this was the first time in his lifetime or the millionth time, it was all the same with Aaron HaKohen. It was with the same energy, with the same love, and perhaps more important than anything else, with the same commitment. Now the Pasuk says in this week's Seder, Al Pi Hashem Yachnu, Al Pi Hashem Yisrael, the Klal Yisrael continued on. The Rebbeinu Shem told him when to rest, the Rebbeinu Shem told him when to move. We know that all the Lamed Tes Melachos, all of the guidelines for what you are or are not allowed to do on Shabbos is learned from the Mishkan. Basically, whatever was done during the Mishkan during the week establishes the criteria of what is officially considered a Malacha, and you have to rest from doing it on Shabbos. One of the Lamed Tes Melachos is Soiser, to take something apart. However, in order to be chayiv on Shabbos, one is only liable if he takes something apart with a constructive intent in mind. In other words, you take something apart in order to rebuild it. It has to be soiser amanas livnas. In addition to that, it has to be soiser amanas livnas b'mekaimai. For example, if I take apart a building or part of a building with my intent to rebuild it elsewhere, although you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos, but technically it would not constitute a liability, which is a chiv chatas. Because you have to take something apart with the intent to rebuild it in its place. Only then is the entire act considered a constructive act. So the Gemara asks the question, being that all the malachos and the guidelines of the malachos and the criteria of the malachos are learned from the Mishkan, that means that this malacha of Saiser of taking something apart has to be by the Mishkan, where indeed it was. They would take apart the Mishkan every time they had to move it. But they wouldn't put the Mishkan back together in the same place. They would take it apart. It would travel along with Klal Yisrael, and the next time they had to camp, they would put it together. So the Mishkan itself was not Soiser Almanat Livnais Dimakaimai. The Mishkan itself was Soiser Almanat Livnais Shaloi Dimakaimai. Frek the Gemara, so how could you learn the Malacha of Soiser from the Mishkan? Physically, what happened in the Mishkan is not the same as the actual guidelines of Soiser are. The Gemara answers an interesting teretz. Because it says, that Hashem told them when to rest and Hashem told them when to go, therefore it is as if it was taken apart and put together in the same place. So how do we explain this? Because Hashem told them when to go and when to stop, therefore it's considered as if it was the same place, but it wasn't the same place. They were continuously moving. So the Avinach brings from the Arizal that the place where the Mishkan stood on was the actual Mokim HaMikdash. The Avinach says that the Mokim HaMikdash was nekar, it was uprooted from its place by the Har HaMiri, and it came to the Midbar to be with Klal Yisrael. And quoting the Arizal, he says the Mokim HaMishkan continued to move with them wherever they went. So wherever the Mishkan was put up was the actual Mokim HaMikdash. It was the same ground. And that explains the Avinach is the meaning of Oti Hashem Yachnu, Oti Hashem Yisrael. Hashem told them when to rest, Hashem told them when to go. In other words, through Hashem's word, the actual Mokim HaMikdash continued along with them. Stopped and went, stopped and went. That's Klal Yisrael would stop and go. That being the case, we can now understand why the Gemara says, because of Oti Hashem Yachnu, Oti Hashem Yisrael, it is considered as if it were Yisrael Menas Livnais B'Mekaimeh, because indeed the Mishkan was taken apart and put together in the same place. The actual ground went along with them. But if you look at this from a little bit of a different perspective, essentially we're saying the same thing as the Maggid Shlochi Shalal Shalishina. The atmosphere of the Mishkan created a kedusha in the hearts of Klal Yisrael that regardless of where they were, regardless if it was a little shtetl in Europe or it was a locomotive taking them into the big city, the Mokim HaMikdash went along with them. There was an ability to transplant the amunah that they experienced internally within the Anami HaKavod and the Mana B'Beshel Miriam and replace it along all the little stops of Golis or the big stops of Golis. In other words, don't think because you're so far away from Eretz Yisrael, from Yerushalayim, from the Beis HaMikdash, don't think that it's such an extended Golis and we have fallen so far, therefore it's impossible to create in our lives an actual Mokim HaMikdash. A Yiddish Shabbos table could be the Mokim HaMikdash. The Arizal says that's like preferably the Shabbos table should have 4 legs. The Menorah, the Shabbos Licht, it's all the same. It can be Mashpia, the same Kiddusha. The Chalak, our Shabbos table, is the Lechem HaPanim. And perhaps one can venture to say that the Orein of Svarim, the Svarim Shank in every Yiddish house, that a little child grows up looking at as part of the furniture of the house, part of the structure of the house, that's the Orein. And the father sitting by the Shabbos table, or whoever leads the Shabbos table, the Zmirais, the Divrei Torah, these are the Kohanim doing the Avodah. The more sincere the chinuch of children are, the more of a tefillah there is, the more of a tear that is dropped by the lighting of the Shabbos Neiros, to be mashpia Yerushalayim, and to raise real Erlich Yiddish children, and the more the ability the children have to transplant this Beis HaMikdash that they take from their house into their respective different destinations of life. And finally, getting back to one more pshat in Magid Shvachei Shel Aaron Shel Oishina. Aaron HaKohen, despite all the tremendous honor, despite this glory that was the envy of kings throughout the world, throughout the entire civilized world in his lifetime, Aaron HaKohen never changed. That same wholesomeness, that same purity of soul, that same anivus, that same Aaron HaKohen that everyone loved before he was given this great position, was the same Aaron HaKohen afterwards. All of the kavod didn't affect him one iota. That is Magid Shvachei Shel Aaron Shel Oishina. His stepping up to that menorah didn't change him. If you do, when the Chofetz Chaim was traveled to Moscow for a certain evening for yeshivas, he sent a letter to one of his friends, and he asked him please not to inform anybody about the exact date of his arrival or the time of his arrival. He didn't want that there should be a tremendous procession or a big Kabbalah panim for him. And they asked the Chofetz Chaim, why not? Why can't all the people line up and there should be this tremendous fanfare for you when you come? What really troubles you over here? So the Chofetz Chaim said the following mashal. He said, a person wants to eat kugel on Shabbos. He has this tremendous urge, not just to have a small piece, but he wants to polish off a whole tray of kugel. Zar kugel for Shabbos. So he says to his wife, I'm hungry. Please give me the kugel. And his wife says, it's Erev Shabbos today. We need the kugel for tomorrow. You're hungry. Eat bread. Eat a Danish. Eat anything, but don't eat up the kugel for Shabbos. Kugel you only eat on Shabbos, the Chofetz Chaim said. Kavod is like kugel. It's true, all what you're saying is important. The kavod HaTorah and everything, the glory of Torah, the Kiddush of Torah should be felt by the masses. But I feel that kavod, that's good for the Yom Shekulei Shabbos. That's good for Olam Haba. Anyone that was Meitzah Nevesh himself for a Torah down here will get his share of kavod. That's good for the times of Mashiach. To use up kavod right now in this world, that's like eating the kugel Erev Shabbos. If you use it up Erev Shabbos, what can I tell you? I'm just here to go hungry on Shabbos. Now one can rest assured that the Chofetz Chaim, even when he was greeted by the massive crowds, didn't eat up the kugel. He didn't change either. But the reason he didn't change was because of this mindset, because of this attitude. And that's what the pasuk says, the Neil Tamishvana is teaching us about Aaron HaKohen. The same Aaron HaKohen to whom it was not beneath his dignity to walk into a house where there was a lot of yelling and sit down between a husband and wife and work things out, and to do the same between two friends who weren't talking to each other. Aaron HaKohen continued to do this after he ascended the throne of glory to kindle the menorah. Magid Shvachei Shel Aaron Shel Oishina. He did not change. In other words, he didn't eat up the kugel on this world. When the Yidli Emes was a small child, he went over to his mother and asked how to spell a certain word. So his mother said, let me give you some advice. If you want to know whether or not you spelled a word right, close your eyes and imagine the word. And let's see if that's the way you spelled it. So the Yidli Emes tried, and he said, Mama, it doesn't work. And when she asked her son, why not? He answered, when I close my eyes, I see the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. I think about the Rebbeinu Shalom. I don't see the spelling word then. I don't want to use the word imagination, because imagination depicts something false, something unreal. The Emes is a person who has an ability to close his eyes and sometimes reach into not an imagination, but a realization. A realization that is sometimes more real than what he sees when his eyes are open. The Yerushalmi says that when a person learns a memra from an Amoira, from a Tana, a Vart from a Gadol, you should try to imagine that the Baal HaShemua is Oimed Lefanav, that the person is standing in front of you. You say over a Vart from Rav Yaakov, you say over a Vart from the Sam Sofer, whether or not you remember what the picture of the Sam Sofer looks like. But let your abstract subconscious go to work. Imagine that he's standing in front of you, repeating the Vart.
Now it's interesting. Maybe we saw pictures of a Chassam Sofer. We definitely don't have any pictures of Abaye and Rava, yet the Yerushalmi tells us, when you say Omer Abaye, you imagine that Abaye is standing in front of you. Now here we come to a very important inyan. We know how much controversy there has been about the supernatural in the last couple of months, the connection to neshamas from a different realm, from a different world, and all of the controversy, the whirlwind of opinions that would naturally follow an episode like this. People that are absolutely sure that it's for real, people that are absolutely sure that it's for fake, people that say it's somewhere in the middle, people that don't know. And then you have the personalities that are very adamant and outspoken about their opinions, and those that enjoy just sitting on the sidelines and watching others argue. Whatever the case may be, whatever the nature of a dibuk is, whether the real ones of the past or questionable ones, a dibuk is a negative concept. It's an inyan of a neshama that is not allowed to its place of rest and is looking for some type of place of refuge. But I heard this from an Adam Gadol. The Ruben Taiva, there is a positive aspect to this, which is uncontroversial, which doesn't require massive publicity, but it's a fact of everyday life. The Slam Hakadoshim tell us about a temporary Ibur Neshama in a positive sense. When a Yid has a Mesiras Nefesh for a mitzvah, it is possible that there is an Ibur Neshama. There's a Neshama of a tzaddik, of a parent or a grandparent that also had Mesiras Nefesh for that mitzvah, that joins him temporarily. And Baruch Hashem, when it comes to this type of Ibur Neshama, no strange things happen. No spooky things happen, nothing ominous, on the contrary. But we can all look back in our lives and point to specific hurdles that we had to deal with, and we wonder, how did we have the koyach to do it? How could we have climbed those peaks and those mountains? We took on certain challenges. Where did we get the courage to do it? Where did we get the emunah, the betachon? There are times in life when a yid is mekabel upon himself a mitzvah with mesiras nefesh that he gets a little extra natural help. The Arizal once stood up for one of his talmidim, and the Talmud turned around to see who walked in behind him. Why is the Rebbe standing up for me? And the Arizal says, you know who just walked in with you? Pinchas Beyaya walked in with you. Shir Bayachai's father-in-law. And the Arizal told him, you must have just been Isaac in the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim, of redeeming prisoners with great Mesiras Nefesh. Being that Rav Pinchas Beyaya spent his life doing that, therefore one who is Isaac in this mitzvah draws a certain kiddush, a certain energy. Whatever this means, we don't have to understand it because we can't understand it. But the Payal Hayotza, the printout, is clear. There's a certain siyata d'shmaya, a certain enthusiasm, a certain ability beyond the person's koyach that he gets, and this is pure kiddusha, through doing a kind of a mitzvah like this. Now, the Arizal saw a Pinchas Beyar walk in with him. We don't see these things. But when we think how sometimes we commit ourselves to do something and we have the koyach to do it, especially when it required Mesiras Nefesh, we have to wonder, who knows who came along to help us. We'll find out eventually. We mentioned the story many times that the Rebbe Rabbunim used to go to a special shiur that the Chayzer gave. Deep shiur in Kabbalah, once a week. And once the Rebbe Rabbunim was going to this shiur, where only a privileged few were allowed in, and his mother said, excuse me, would you mind minimal schlepping up those sacks of wheat from the basement? And he wondered to himself, what does he do? Does he go to the shiur? Does he schlep up sacks of wheat? And he decided, look, this is a Seder Eisa of Kibbutzim that comes before all Cheshbonos, even the opening of the heavens. He has to do what the Torah tells him to do, no chachmas. So instead of hearing this murder shiur that he waited for all week, he schlepped up sacks of wheat because his mother told him to do so. Later on, he came to the Chayzer, and the Chayzer stood up for him. And the Chayzer told him that the Amoira Abaya just walked in with him. Abaya? Why Abaya? And the Chayzer said, you must have just had a mitzvah with Mesiras Nefesh that pertains to either Kibbud or Ein. Abaya is Rashi Tevis Asher B'cha Yerucham Yasin. Abaya was a Yasin and never had the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of Kibbud Ein. And he always longed for this opportunity. He was jealous, and this is the kind of jealousy which is mutter. He was jealous of someone who had the opportunity to do the mitzvah. He had such a longing for this mitzvah, he developed such an association to it because he didn't have it, that as a result he's permanently connected to the mitzvah. And when a yid is mekayim the mitzvah of kibbud avim with mesiras nefesh, the Amayr Abaya comes along with him and walks along with him for a little while, smiles to him, nods to him. Again, without a chayzer we don't see it. But if we think back to that little extra energy that we sometimes had during difficult periods in life, when we were torn between different situations and we didn't know what we were going to do, but somehow we pushed through, who knows who was with us? Chazal tell us, when you say over a memra from an Adam Gadol, from anyone, his lips move in the caver. What does that mean, his lips move in the caver? If I see over a vart now from a Tana or a Mayer or an Adam Gadol, his lips are moving, of what significance is that? So some say it means that the tzaddik is Mayer Chusim for the person. Well, whatever the case may be, there is some connection. The more you associate yourself with the one you are saying the memra from, then the more you're getting out of what you're saying. The limit of Torah is not a verbal exercise. It's a reality that creates malachim, that makes for a better person. The Chaim Shmulevitz said that one of the greatest moments in his life happened during the war. He crossed the border someplace and he stayed by a certain house. He knocked on the door and the person happened to be an old friend of his. And Chaim sat down to a cup of tea and they were talking, and he said over a vart from his Rabbi Yerucham, the Mira Mishgiach. And the man who was listening to it jumped up and said, "Excuse me." He ran out of the room and came back with his hat and jacket. And he sat down with the aim in a year and he asked Reb Chaim Shmulevitz to repeat the vart. So Reb Chaim said, "Why did you do this?" So he told him, when you started saying that vart, I felt mamish like Rabbi Yerucham was sitting over here. I saw the Rebbe in front of my eyes the way you were repeating it, so I felt a certain years for covered I have to run for my hat and jacket. Now this is during a time of war. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz is running from one place to another. Never mind that the next week is uncertain, the next day is uncertain, the next hour is uninsured. And Reb Chaim looks back to that moment and he says, it was the greatest moment of my life. If that person felt when I said over a Torah from Rabbi Yerucham that Rabbi Yerucham was sitting there, that meant that this listener was perceptive to what was in Reb Chaim Shmulevitz's heart when he said over a vart from his Rabbi. His Rabbi was in his heart. And that was a testimony to all of his Torah, to all of his shmuzim, to everything that he said over. That they weren't isolated concepts and ideas, rather it was the Messiah from his Rebbeim. As if to a certain degree his Rebbeim were there. And when his Rebbeim said it over, their Rebbeim were in them, all the way up until Moshe Rabbeinu and Har Sinai. And that defines Torah Lishma. And with this in mind, there is a Peledik Chasam Sofer in this week's Parsha. Probably one of the most darshaned Rashis is the Rashi in this week's Parsha. Ba'aloif chasaneres el mul pnei amenoira yoyiru shiva tzaneros. Vayas kein aharon, and Aaron did it, el mul pnei amenoira helen erisel. Why does the pasuk say that Aaron did it? Rashi tells us, Magid shvachim shalarim shalashine didn't change. He did exactly as Moshe Rabbeinu told him. There's a myriad of divrei Torah on this Rashi. But listen to how the Chasam Sofer explains it. He brings the Yerushalmi we just mentioned at the end of the second parak in the schacter Shkol. That Hoimer Shmua b'Shem Amra, if you're saying over something in the name of another tzaddik, Yidoime b'Yeinav Ki'ilu Bala Shmua Oimed L'Negdoi. Imagine that the Bala Shmua, the one you are saying it from, is standing in front of you. Shenemer, as the pasuk says, Ach b'Tselem Yisalach Ish. His image should be in front of you. Zok the Chasam Sofer, what does this accomplish? And I don't just say over a Chasam Sofer or a Chazayin Ish or a Vart from the Baal Shem Tov, but I imagine that he's standing in front of me, as the Chassam Sofer understands it, it is, quote, Mesugel ma'oid, lahamshech al atzmoi, to bring upon himself, me'or oisei Talmid Chacham, shezacha l'chadesh oisei hashmua. Something about the Siyat Shmaya, something about the light, something about the schar, something about the kedusha of the person. You are saying the Zvatar from settles on you. If you imagine that he is standing in front of you and you repeat the Zvatar. In this week's parsha we have the Vahi ben Tzoya ha'orain, continues the Chassam Sofer. And according to one opinion in the Gemara, the Chumash Bamidbar until Vahi ben Tzoya is one parsha. Vahi ben Tzoya is a different parsha. And from after Vahi ben Tzoya until the end of the Midbar is another parsha. If you count that way, so you have not 5 Chumashim, but you have 7 Sifrei Torah. Zok the Chassam Sofer, and I guess we ought to try to imagine the Chassam Sofer as we're saying this. The 7 Kinei Menorah correspond to, according to this count, the 7 Sifrei Torah. If someone wants to learn Torah, but he wants the Kiddush of Torah to take hold within him, so this is the way to learn. El Mul Pinei HaMenorah Ya'iru Shivat HaNeiros. Mul Pinei HaMenorah. The Menorah, says the Chassam Sofer, is the Talmid Chacham who holds up the Torah. The pasuk is giving us instruction. Mul Pinei HaMenorah. When you're learning Torah, imagine that you are standing opposite the face of the Talmid Chacham, the Baal HaShemua. Imagine his image in front of you, as if you are standing in front of him. Those are the instructions of the pasuk. The pasuk goes on to say, who was the first to fulfill these instructions? Aaron HaKohen. As soon as Aaron HaKohen heard these words from Moshe Rabbeinu, the pasuk says, "Vayaf Kain Ahara." Such Rashi, lahagid shvachai, to tell us the praise of Aaron Shaloi Shina, but he didn't change anything. Aaron fulfilled the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. Moshe Rabbeinu taught him how, and as he was doing it, he completely imagined himself subservient to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was standing in front of him. He imagined the face of his younger brother standing there while he was performing the mitzvah and listening to his instructions. So add this to the list of the many thousands of answers on this kasha. Why does Rashi have to tell us this? Magid shvachi shel Aaron shel Shina. Of course Aaron didn't change. Of course Aaron wouldn't deviate from what he was told. And the answer is, not only did he do it, but in his imagination, in his mind, it was his younger brother whom he recognized as the teacher of Klal Yisrael that stood before him. It was Moshe Rabbeinu that was imprinted in his heart. It was Moshe Rabbeinu that was engraved in his mind, and that is how Aaron lit the menorah. And that is the great Shalach of Aaron HaKohen. Rav Shraga Feivel Minelovich, the founder of Torah V'das, and as the Satmar Rebbe Chaim Levracha put it, the one who actually cultivated and plowed the ground over here to plant yeshivas in America. He was very aduk in his Rebbe, the Tzelem Rav, the Yehuda Sabayim. When he came to America, and he was trying to find a place to plant his seeds in this wasteland, he was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He stepped onto a road, and suddenly he saw the image of his Rebbe, the Yehuda Sabayim, and he fell back in fear. And just then a car whizzed by, like around the curve. He was absolutely certain that somehow his Rebbe had come to him to save his life. The truth is, however, if our attitude in being makabel Torah from our Rebbeim and learning Torah from Svarim and listening to a Geschmack of art, whatever the case may be, whenever we adapt some type of connection to the previous generation, if we say it or study it, that's one thing. If we imagine that tzaddik is in front of our eyes, there are many pitfalls in life and many dangers in life that we may or may not realize we will automatically be pushed away from. Or we'll have an ingrained sense to step back even if it's just in the nick of time. And it's interesting, because we look at the rest of Parshas behaaloscha, the issue of the Slav, and the Psukim, Moshe Rabbeinu comes forth to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to deal with his relationship with Klal Yisrael. And then you have two difficult parshiyos of Shlach and Kairach, where each in their own way, there are people who challenge Moshe Rabbeinu. It seems that the contrast over here is for us to understand the difference. Look what happens to Aaron HaKohen when he closes his eyes and he envisions Moshe Rabbeinu. Look at the beginning of Parshas behaaloscha, the people who wanted the Pesach Sheni, wanted to come closer. It brings the greatest bracha. It brings the greatest Yeshuas. It reflects the true emes in the heart of every Yid. And contrast that with people who closed their eyes and instead of seeing the rebellion, saw themselves. And look at the tragedies that brought, that we suffer from to this very day. So it's as if the pasuk is sort of warning us, take heed. When you close your eyes, make sure you envision the right things, because our future depends on it. Several years ago, during the elections in Eretz Yisrael, one of the members of the left, I will not dignify that person by mentioning the name, but one of the members of the left, basking in apikoursis, referred to the members of the right, not necessarily even from people, but anyone with a more conservative outlook than this person had, as the asafsuf, the rabble, not even regular people, people that really don't deserve even the basic human rights. They have no right to express themselves. They shouldn't be part of us. They're the asafsuf. And the silence, the lack of protest against her demeaning remarks was even louder than her ugly comment to start with. But it's interesting. Chazal tell us, Kol ha-paisel b'mumay paisel, that when someone accuses someone else or does name calling, that's usually the greatest sign that the name caller himself is probably worthy of that description. What's really in someone's own heart, the blemish within ourselves, is what comes out in our anger when we're trying to diminish someone else. So let's take a closer look at this word, asafsuf, and perhaps it can be very revealing in understanding pshat in the pasuk. The pasuk says, Kapitel Yud Aleph, pasuk Daled, V'yu asafsuf asher b'kir bo yisavu taiva. But the rabble that they had taken in amongst them, referring to the Erev Rav, goaded themselves on to desires, vayeshuvu vayifku gam b'nei Yisrael, and as a result of their complaints and their crying about Torah and mitzvahs and their lack of taiva, the Bnei Yisrael also, or some of the Bnei Yisrael, began to join them. Vayomer, they said, Mi yachalenu basa, who shall give us meat to eat? What does the word asafsuf mean? Where does it come from? Rav Shamshua Hirsch explains that had the Erev Rav been sincere in really becoming part of Klal Yisrael and living up to the ideals of Klal Yisrael, then they should be described as a people that were nesaf or osaf. Osaf means to gather. They were gathered into Klal Yisrael. The door was open to them. But that sincerity never actually existed. Klal Yisrael was the winning team, and they wanted to join the winning team. Instead of osaf, what they actually did was something more similar to the word sofaf. What does sofaf mean? Well, a sof is a container, a vessel. Sof is also a threshold. They stepped along with Klal Yisrael. They wanted to be in the same basket, in the same vessel as Klal Yisrael, as long as the world oohed and ahed about the greatness of Klal Yisrael and the miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had done for them. But that's all they wanted. They didn't really want to become integrated. They didn't want to be assimilated and absorbed into the fiber of Klal Yisrael. They just wanted to be there when things are going good for Klal Yisrael. As a result, now that they had been in the midbar for quite a while, they began to complain. We are very comfortable over here. We can't have what we want. We remember the fish that we ate in Mitzrayim freely, chinam. Didn't have to pay for it. The man was a spiritual kind of food. You had to be on the madrega to be able to enjoy it. Rav Shlomo Zalman said that he was at a Chavetz Chaim one Shabbos, and the Chavetz Chaim asked him, it says about the man that it had the taste of whatever you thought about. What if a person didn't think about anything? What did it taste like? And the Chavetz Chaim answered, if you didn't think, it didn't taste like anything. That was the whole purpose of the man. To teach a yid to think, what do you want? What are you craving for? And when you set your goals as to what you want, then the man helped you along. The man gave you a taste. So if you weren't thinking about the right things, the man didn't have any taste. They didn't want this. They didn't want food that you had to earn its taste. Why can't we just go into a restaurant and order fish and sit down with a bottle of wine? We want to go in the opposite direction. We want our meals to be an opportunity to shake off all the responsibilities of the world and just indulge in the sea of taiva. And here you're telling me that unless I get my goals together, and unless I sit down and do tshuva and say I'm now going to have an uplifting experience and be makabel upon myself more restrictions, I'm not going to enjoy the food? Well, that's not my idea of a party. The Atzad of Sheni Yevesha in Kyle. Our soul is parched without anything. Our neshamis are empty, and we want it to remain empty. We want to live an unrestricted life, and as a result, bilti yalamanei neinu. All we can do is stare at the man. It doesn't do us any good unless you want to try to be a tzaddik through eating the man. If you don't think the right things, it doesn't taste like anything. You can just look at it. So now we understand why anyone with any kind of a hasaga of establishing Eretz Yisrael to be an example of Kiddusha and Tahara is referred to by those who want exactly the opposite as the Asafsaf, the rebel. Kala Paisel, B'mumai Paisel. What you call someone else is like a flag. It's a banner. This is what I am. This is the Asafsaf Asher B'kirvai, Hisabu Taiva, who wants Eretz Yisrael, the Palter and Shomelech, the palace of the king, to be exactly the opposite of what by its nature it has to represent. They want Eretz Yisrael to be a bastion of unrestricted living, of Hisabu Taiva, like the Chavetz Chaim teaches. They didn't even have enough time, but they were saying, what can we do to create more temptations? The Arab were upset that given the environment, it just didn't nurture taiva. We don't have the same drive, the same lust that we had in Mitzrayim. What's happening to us? Instead of taking advantage of it and saying, well, now we're embark on a new kind of life, they said, well, our life is empty. Well, of course it's empty. The lack of taiva is a platform to now engage in a meaningful life. If you just stand there and don't do anything with it, all you're going to be is depressed that you don't have the taiva. So those who are fighting to be able to sell Chazer in Eretz Yisrael call those who are against it the Asafsaf. That makes sense. Kala Paisel, B'mumai Paisel. Now, we make a mistake. We all know about the man, that it was different for tzaddikim, different for Rishayim, different for Beinanim, various different midrashei Chazal. The tzaddik walked out and he found the man right in front of his door. The Beinani had to walk a little bit to get the man. The Rosh had to walk very far to get the man. The Gemara Masechtas Yoma points out sometimes the man was referred to as lechem, which means bread. Sometimes ugais, which meant you had to first bake it. Sometimes it says the tachnu, they had to even grind it. And the Gemara answers, for tzaddikim it was bread ready to eat. For Beinanim it was ugais, they had to bake it. For a shayim they had to first grind it. When a person went out to gather the man, that was a thermometer that measured his ruchniyistical level. Now when we hear this chazal, we try to think, okay, there were three groups of people. There were the tzaddikim who had it easy, they had more time to learn, because the man was very ready-made. There were the Beinanim who had to work a little bit with the man, and there was another group of people called the Shayim that had to work real hard. They had to walk real far, and then they had to start grinding it. But as the Kehelos Yitzchak explains, that's a misconception. It wasn't that there were groups of people. People themselves had varying experiences with the mud based on their report card of that day. You sat there with your friend and you spoke a lashon hara that you weren't supposed to the next day. Suddenly, where was the mud? It's not in front of my door. Uh-oh. You ran through a Kriya Shema thinking about 1,000 different things except the words because you were in a rush. Suddenly you sat down to eat the manna. You realized you had to bake it beforehand. I didn't have to do this yesterday. And then one day you went out and you looked at the manna, you tried to bake it, and you realized, I can't bake this, I have to grind it first. You began to think, was I behaaloscha yesterday? I have to sit there and go through the entire day until I figure out why this happened. That was the kind of life that the people had to live. There was a printout every single day. How are you doing in terms of your ruchnius? Now the problem was also that this printout was posted on a public screen. It wasn't confidential. And actually, as the Mefarshim explained, there were two levels over here. When a person started falling from his ruchniistic madrega, first he was warned privately. The man still fell in front of his house. But he saw that he had to bake it first. And if he didn't get the message, the man still fell in front of his house, but he saw that he had to grind it first. If he still didn't get the message, now he had to walk to get the man. So already the neighbors are saying, so-and-so has to walk around the corner to get the man. Yesterday it was on his doorstep. And if the neighbors were not saying it, which they ought not to, but you have to worry they're thinking about it, because why do I have to walk 3 blocks now to get my man? So you see, there wasn't really much opportunity for a free-for-all in Ruchnius. You sat down at night and you decided, should I sit out and schmooze with my friends, or should I learn a black Gemara with my children? You decided to learn the black Gemara for the simple reason that it would be embarrassing to have to walk the next morning to a different neighborhood to pick up your mom. So Klal Yisrael was being structured, guided, and the truth of the matter is they didn't really have much of a choice other than continuous soul searching and becoming better and better. And that is why the Asafsuf said, we don't want the mom. We want meat. We want beef. It wasn't so much the meat that they wanted. The meat that they would have gotten would have had a good hashgacha. There would have been a good shayfet. He would have checked the knife 1,000 times. It would have been glad kosher. There was no question about that. They wanted meat for a different reason. They wanted meat so that they could have the luxury of eating without having the food glaring back at them and saying, you didn't daven Ma'ariv last night the way you were supposed to. And that is why in defense of the man, the pasuk says, "V'haman kizra gadhu," the einoi ke'ein habidoilach. What does this word mean? Rashi explains it's a kind of crystal. It was transparent. The Torah makes it very clear. Their problem with the man wasn't that it didn't taste good. Their problem with the man was it was a looking glass. If you wanted to eat it, if you wanted to be sustained by the man, you were also exposing yourself to a transparent guide, to a telescope that goes directly into your heart and makes it very clear where you're standing. And what does the pasuk say right afterwards? Shatu hu'am v'laktu v'tachnu berachayim. The people roamed about and gathered it. They would have to grind it in mills, oidachi b'meducha, or pound it in a mortar, ubishlu b'par, and cook it in pots. But also I say ugais, and make it into cakes. In other words, the work that you had to do was relative to your madrega. This is what irked them. This is what they couldn't take. Instead of using the man for what it should be, and that is a precious gift that directs you constantly and lets you know where you're standing, they said, we can't stand this anymore. We don't want to be told where we're standing. We definitely don't want anyone else to know where we're standing. Now Chazal tell us that they saved 1 jar of man. And when the people complained to Yirmiyahu, Hanavi, we have no time to learn Torah because we have to be Isaac in Parnasa. So Yirmiyah took out this jar of man and he showed it to Klal Yisrael. But Rabbi Hashem didn't sustain you in the midbar? But what is Yirmiyah's point? But we don't have man falling today. And the answer is that the man and the qualities of the man do fall today. You just have to look at it. You have to know how to look at it. The parnasa that a person makes is also man min hashamayim, except that it comes through a lavush of teva. As a result, when a person encounters difficulties in his quest for parnasa, instead of getting frustrated or slamming the door or blaming or screaming so-and-so, perhaps we ought to view it the same way the Yidden viewed the man. If someone opened the door of his tent in the morning and he saw that his man was all the way down the road, he didn't yell and scream, "Who left the man out there?" He knew. Oy vey. Now what did I say yesterday? What did I do yesterday? What did I think yesterday? And with a heavy heart, he went down the road to get his man. And the next morning, if he found the man by his door, so he knew, Baruch Hashem, I found the reason, I did tshuva. But by them it was obvious. The purpose, however, of making it obvious for them was to teach us that when things don't go our way, before you turn to yell and scream, look into yourself. All right, what is the message that the Rebbeinu Shalom is sending me? What can I do to correct things over here? In Romania, there was a famous Beckenroth well. A rich Yiddish, a tremendous oil well. He was a schacter of a chassid. And the schacter of Rebbe once visited his plants. He came for an Indian of tzedakah. The Beckenroth family was a tremendous supporter of Moses, Torah, Chinuch, various tzedakah projects. And Agav, he went for a walk with the Rebbe and said, we want to dig more for oil. Where should I dig? And the Rebbe tapped with his stick on the ground and said, not over here. And everyone else laughed. They told him the Rebbe maybe is an expert at what's doing in the Shemei Shemayim, in the heavenly realm, but for what's doing underneath the ground, there are better experts, they told old man Beckenroth. So somebody was persuaded by the geologists, by the people who were working for him, and they spent a tremendous amount of money. They invested in drilling on the place where the Rebbe said not to. And after spending an exorbitant sum, they struck water, not oil. Everybody was upset. They had wasted so much money. But the old man Beckenroth was Molei Simcha. He called his family together and he wanted to make a big Suda. They said to him, how can you be so happy? We wasted all that money. And time we could have been digging elsewhere. He said, because you persuaded me, and Baruch Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom taught me a lesson. You have to have a mun of chacham. If you ask and you were told, don't do differently. It was worth drilling in the wrong place to show me that wherever we do drill and find oil, it's all hashgacha pratis. It's hashgacha min hashemayim. There's nothing doing, regardless of how deep it is below the earth, that isn't directly guided from the highest point of shemayim. We can learn to live our lives this way. Take the difficulties in life, take the nisyonos, take the aggravations, and say, okay, why today did I have to grind the mud instead of just baking it? And why today do I have to bake it instead of just having it ready-made? The messages are still there. And if you look hard enough within inside you, you will find it, I will find it, we will find it. The only thing is, today you can fool yourself. You can say, I made a bad investment because I made a bad investment. It has nothing to do with whether I gave enough ma'asos. It has nothing to do with whether I said a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Today we have a b'chira. The B'sayidim wanted that b'chira. They wanted a piece of meat. They wanted a piece of steak. They wanted meatball instead of the mud, because with meatballs you can say if it doesn't work out, it has nothing to do with my kriya shema meat. It has nothing to do with my tzedakah. It has nothing to do with the way I sit lach. You can say it has to do with putting in too much pepper or too little salt. They couldn't take it that they had to deal with the mud with the hashgacha is so obvious. Our hashgacha is to take the meatballs and the steak and to turn it into mud. And say it's not the pepper, it's not the salt, it's not the bad recommendation of the stockbroker. Our design is to say, okay, what can I do to be masaking this? We mentioned many times the story of Rabbi Zalman Rebbetzin, the great tzedekis, Bela Hinda, who once came crying and screaming to her husband that the milk cooked over. She insisted if this never happened in the last 20 years, that it happened today, there had to be a good reason for it, and they can't do anything else until they figure out what the reason is. And at this point, Mrs. Zalman said he himself thought she was carrying this a little bit too far. But she ventured to suggest that there was a milkman who had retired, whom they continued to pay anyhow, who probably came by this morning when they were by a bris, and no one was home, and he thinks now he's never going to be paid again, and that's why this happened, because there's a yid b'tzar. So they went to look for him, and they found out that she was right. The man was sitting and crying. Rabbi Tzibela Hinda teaches us that our cup of milk can also be mud. You just have to know how to prepare it.
The Rebbeinu Shalom said to Aaron and Miriam, "Umadua lo yireisem ledaber bi'avdi b'Moshe." And how can you not be afraid to speak against my servant, against Moshe? Sucks Rashi. Take note. The pasuk does not say bi'avdi Moshe. Why were you not scared to speak against my servant Moshe?
Rather, the pasuk says, "Be'avdi b'Moshe," against my servant, against Moshe. There are two separate issues over here. First, be'avdi, how can you not speak against my servant? Afal pisha ena Moshe, even if he wouldn't be Moshe Rabbeinu, but the mere fact that he is my servant. Second of all, how can you speak against Moshe? B'Moshe afilu ena avdi. How can you speak against Moshe even if he were not to be my servant? Kedai heyisem lirei mepanav. You should have been afraid of him. That alone should have been a reason. The Kolchkinen, for sure, all the more so. Shehu avdi, that he is both my servant and the Eved Melech, and the servant of the king is automatically like a king. Whether you approve of his actions or not, you should have said, continues Rashi, Ein HaMelech le'havei. The king does not love him for nothing. The entire perhaps you are going to suggest, well, Eini makir b'maisav, I don't know his deeds. Says that's worse than the first. He is an Eved of Hashem, and you are saying because you don't understand him, therefore that means nothing to you. Therefore you're dismissing the fact that he is an Eved of Hashem. I would like to share with you a story that is brought down in the Sipurei Chasidim, and I also heard it from the Rosh Hashiva of Pavel Zangesand. The Ktsaitz HaChayshin was from the big Misnagdim, and it happened that in his city, Stri, there were many Chasidim of the Chayza of Lublin. And usually when it comes to these types of disputes, you have three different types of people. You have two that take position, and you have a third that don't take any positions other than they want to keep the dispute going. And they keep throwing wood into the fire. And the situation was deteriorating rapidly. At one point, the Ktsaitz HaChayshin put these Chasidim of the Chayza into Cherem, which meant that for 30 days you weren't permitted to talk to them, they were not permitted to come into shul, and so on. These Chasidim were very upset about this, so they decided they're going to leave Stri, and they're going to come to their Rebbe, the Chayza. And they figured they'll come to their Rebbe as heroes. I mean, after all, the Ktsaitz HaChayshin put them into Cherem only because they were Chasidim. So the same way in Stri they would be locked out of the shul. When they will come to Lublin, they will be taken in with open arms. You know how it is in a machlokes. Someone who was cast away on one side is the hero on the other side. So they came to Lublin. Now in Lublin there was a minig that the shamus would go into the Rebbe, and he would give the Rebbe a list of people who arrived, and they waited to come so the Rebbe can give them shalom aleichem. When the shamus told the Rebbe that so-and-so and so-and-so are here, the Rebbe said, I can't see them right now. The shamus asked, when could you see them? Figuring the Rebbe was tired, perhaps tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon. So the Chayza thought for a moment. He said, tell them I can give them shalom in 2 weeks and 3 days. The shamus did not understand the response, but if the Rebbe said, he said. So he came back and told them, listen, the Rebbe said he can't give you shalom for another 2 weeks and 3 days. I don't know what this means, but that's what the Rebbe said. So the Chassidim mamish turned white, because they realized that in 2 weeks and 3 days would be the end of the 30-day period that the Ktsaitz put them into Cherem. So when the time period was over, they came to the Rebbe somewhat, if not upset, definitely questioning, Rebbe, how can you do this to us? If you're going to respect the Ktsaitz of Cherem, so what do you expect the Misnagdim to do? And they told the Rebbe the whole dispute and how the whole thing was a mistake and they were accused falsely and so on and so on. So the Chayza said, it's irrelevant. The Ktsaitz HaChayshin is the Sar HaTorah in this generation. And he put you into Cherem. And it is totally irrelevant whether he was right or whether he was wrong. And he touched the pasuk, Umadur lo yeresim ledaber bi'avdi b'Moshe. Bi'avdi afal pi she'eino Moshe, u'b'Moshe afal pi she'eino avdi. So b'yenes, avdi she'eino Moshe, to say that a Kadosh Baruch Hu has a servant who is not at the midreg of Moshe Rabbeinu, that we can understand. But how do you understand the other side of the statement? U'b'Moshe, even if he were Moshe, afal pi she'eino avdi. What does that mean? How can you even translate these words? How can he be Moshe and not be an Eved Hashem? The answer is that the attitude of a Yid has to be when it comes to a Gadol Hadar and a Tzaddik, whether you think he's right, whether you think he's wrong. Even if in your opinion he did an act of Moshe and in this particular instance you think it's not what Hashem wanted, it's irrelevant. His statement is a statement. The derech eretz for him cannot be moved, cannot be altered. And if he declared a cherem, that cherem has to be respected. And he as a person has to be respected. Whether you personally agree with him or not is irrelevant. Even with Shitaka, if he were taka wrong, it's still irrelevant. His statement is still a statement. And it has its bearing in Shemayim. And you can't ignore it. You can't ignore what he says or what he declares. And that is Taichul V'Moshe Apoti She'ena Avi. No person has a right to say about a Gadol Adar or a Tzaddik, well, he's wrong and therefore I don't respect him. You know something? Even if he is wrong, it makes no difference. You have no right to talk against him. You have no right, chas v'shalom, to ridicule him in any way. And if he throws you out for a certain time period, then I am not going to be the one to take you in. That is how I heard the story from a Palm Gesund. There is a little bit of a different version of the story that is brought down in the Sepurei Chasidim, and that is that the Chayz explained as follows. In Klal Yisrael there are two kitos, and they put the stress sometimes on different things. Everybody agrees that the Niglos HaTorah, Torah Shabbat Peh, the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, the Halacha, has to be studied and learned and adhered to. And the Rambam says if someone doesn't accept even one halacha of Torah Shabbat Peh, he is a full bona fide apikairos. There are no compromises. However, you have some that put the stress on Niglos HaTorah, and then you have others that put the stress on Inyanim of Yerushalayim, on Dveikus and the Rabbeinu Shalom. It's not a contradiction. It's just a question of what a person specializes in, or what his tchunas hanefesh is to be able to be mashpia to others. You have the Rosh Hashiva who frames the Rambam, and you have the Meshgiach who teaches Chayvus Avavos. It doesn't mean that the Meshgiach can't frame for a Rambam. It doesn't mean that the Rosh Hashiva can't learn Chayvus Avavos. But generally you have those that specialize in a certain dimension. So the Chayzer teaches the Mediyah lo yeresim l'daber be'avdi b'Moshe. Even if he were be'avdi, meaning that he was Isaac the entire day in Dveikus and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When he walked, he was Mechav and Shemus HaKadoshim. When he sat, he did so L'Shem Shemayim. When he went to sleep, he taught us how to do it L'Shem Shemayim. When you get out of bed, he taught us how to do it with Dveikus and B'Boire. When we eat, when we drink, he would teach us how to do it with a chibur to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even if he were Avdi, he were just the Meshgiach, so to speak, and he was not Moshe. Or by that same token, even if he was just Moshe, the aspect of Niglas HaTorah, Moshe taught us the entire Torah. Even though he didn't walk around stressing the Eved part, the Dveikus B'chol Rega V'Rega, or the hidden aspects of the Kabbalah of Torah, if he was either one of them, you would be mechuyev to respect him and to give him kavod and not to chas v'shalom speak against him, not to speak against any yid of the Kal V'chomer against the Gadol Hadar. In the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, where he represented both, so Kal V'chomer, ever more so, what right did you have Aaron and Miriam to doubt him, even amongst yourself? And of course the Chayzer meant to say to these Talmidim, even if you felt that the Ksais put the nuance on Limud HaTorah and Aaron and Yoni Musar, that does not give you any license whatsoever to not fully subjugate yourself to him, especially when you are in his domain and you are in his town, and you have no one to blame but yourself. The Ber Moshe from the Yerusha Rebbe has a different mahalach in these words. Even if he were Moshe, although he was not my Eved. Because again, it is a very difficult thing to even verbalize. How can you say that he is Moshe and not an Eved Hashem? The Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos, the Lamed Daled Amud Beis, there was a story about Reb Chanina ben Doisa. Shehalach lilmay Torah eitzel Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai. Reb Chanina ben Doisa went to learn Torah by Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai. Zechala benoy Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rachman al-Islam, the son of Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai, became ill. Amar, so Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai said to his Talmud, Chanina beni, Chanina my son, I beg of you, bikesh alav rachnim v'yichya, plead mercy for him and let him live. So the Gemara tells us in Samta Losh, Heniach Roishay ben Birkov. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai put his head down all the way to his knees. He sort of crouched over and pleaded and begged, Bikesh alav rachnim v'chay. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's son recovered. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, you should know, had I done this, it wouldn't have worked. Ilamalai hetiach ben Zakkai as Roishay ben Birkov, kol yoim kuloi. Had Ben Zakkai put his head between his knees the entire day, lo hayu mashgichim olav.
in Hashemayim they wouldn't have even looked at him. But my Talmud, Chanina ben Doisa, he assumed this position and he was able to be Payal Yeshua. Amar lo Yishtek, so Rav Yechon ben Zakkai's wife said to him, somewhat surprised, V'chi Chanina gadol mincha? Is your Talmud Chanina greater than you? That you yourself are admitting in Hashemayim they listened to him but they wouldn't listen to you? Amar he told her, no, not necessarily. But the reason they would have listened to him and not to me is, Elahu doime ke'eved l'fnei HaMelech. He is like an Eved before the Melech. V'ani doime kesar l'fnei HaMelech. And I am like a prince before the king. Now a prince, or a minister of the king, as powerful as he is and as chashuv as he is, but l'maisa, his access to the king is somewhat limited. So true by the cabinet meetings, he sits up close. And by the official state dinners, he speaks and introduces the king. And he's a spokesman to speak for the king and so on. But the reality is that even the most powerful minister cannot march into the king, barge into the king whenever he wants. The king is in his private chambers, he can't just walk in. But the Eved of the king, who's always walking around with the king, bringing him his clothes, bringing him his shoes, taking care of his personal appointments, opening the shades, closing the shades, in a way, he has more access to the king than a minister does. And if he has a good repertoire with the king and they have a good relationship, so he has an opportunity to ask the king favors really at any time. He isn't limited at all. He can just walk into the king's room unannounced. It's an accepted thing. And that's how Rashi explains it over there in Masechtas Brachos. He is ke'eved. Rashi says he is a ben bayis, that is nichnas v'yoytze shaloi b'rshus. As opposed to kisar l'fnei HaMelech she'ein ragul lavi l'fanav. He can't just come in whenever he wants. And we find that also when Chayni Amagel made the circle and he was mispal for rain. The Gemara says in Masechtas Tainis, Chayni Amagel said, Rebbeinu Shalayla, Benecha, your children, Samu Penayim Alai Shanika Ben Beisi L'Fanecha. They assume that I am a Ben Bayis, that I am your Eved. In other words, that I can come in whenever I want. And therefore he pleaded Rachnim that right now, Rebbeinu Shalayla, whether or not the door is open or closed, I came in and I'm asking you that I would like it to rain. And that is also Pshat explains the Moshe in the Megillah. We read, Vayisapelem Haman es kloid ashrei v'roiv banav es kol asher gidloi hamelech v'sasher nisoi al hasarim v'avdi hamelech. Haman is saying, you see how great, how high the king promoted me? He made me higher over his ministers and over his slaves. Isn't that strange? I mean, if he is above all of the king's ministers, doesn't that automatically mean that he's above all the slaves of the king? The teretz is, there's a certain mila to a minister. He has the chashivas, the official chashivas. And then there's a certain mila to an eved that has unlimited access. Haman had both. He was the head prince and he was also the head eved. I sit up front by the meetings and I can even come into the king when he's brushing his teeth. That's what Haman said. And this is what Rashi is telling us over here in Pashas Behaaloscha. The Avdi Afoti She'ein Moshe. Even if he was the B'chinas Eved, like Rav Chanina ben Doisa, that can come into the king whenever he wants. And he was not at the Madrega of Sar. And even if he were the B'chinas Moshe, Afal Pisha Eina Avdi, like Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. In either case, if it's either a Sar or an Eved of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Chas v'Shalom has no right to show any disrespect toward him. The Kolshkina for sure, if he is both Moshe and he is Eved. Moshe Rabbeinu had the milas of both. He can come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim whenever he wanted, and he was also the Melech. He was also the Sar. He was also HaKadosh Baruch Hu's prime minister, Kaviyachol, so to speak. Then the Be'er Moshe says another word, to be mechalik between the B'china of Sar and Eved. The Sar is choshev, the Sar can suggest legislation, the Sar is appointed to implement legislation, but the Sar also can make requests that are within the dimensions of the constitution of that particular malchus. The Eved, on the other hand, can be mishtanish the midas harachna, even if it's not consistent with the king's general policy. The Sar is appointed to establish and make sure that the whole goings-on of the kingdom stays within the parameters of the established policies. And sometimes that puts the Sar himself in a disposition when he needs a taiva that is opposite the policy of the king. But the Eved, he doesn't know from policies, he doesn't know from constitutions, he doesn't know from official position. He knows, I need a favor. And the king likes this person who brings him the coffee with a smile every morning. The king does him a favor. We come here to a very powerful understanding of what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai meant when he distinguished himself between he and Rav Chanina ben Dosa. There is a story that the Chayzer once told one of his Talmidim that if he comes to his matzeva and he is mispal, he will grant him any request. And he came and he was mispal. He had an Isar and he was mispal. Rabbi, please get me out of this. The Chayzer came to him in a dream and he said, do me a favor. I know I promised you, but can you please go to some of the tzaddikim who are alive today and ask them for a bracha? Don't ask me. And he explained to him why. He says, I'm up here in Shemayim now, and I see mipi eldian le'seitze herois. I see that what you think is the worst thing in the world is really the best thing for you. I see how the most strict of the midas hadin is really rachman. I see that it's really good for you. You should have this tzara. The tzara is temporary, and the benefit of it will be forever after. It's very difficult for me to be mispal that you should get out of the tzara, which is not going to be good for you in the long run. So I give you an answer. Tzaddikim that are still alive are at least to a certain degree limited in their perception. Let them be mispal for you because they don't see as much as I do. For me, it's a difficult thing to do. The Kedushas Levi says that's shot that Rav Chanina ben Dosa was ke'eved v'fnei hamelach. And the Aruch HaChaim adds that shot that he put his head between his knees. In other words, he was misalik himself on his madregas. Rav Chanina ben Dosa said, look, I don't want to know from my Ruach HaKodesh, I don't want to know from what's good, what's not good. I know everything is good, Rabbeinu Shalom. I don't want to see what's going to happen at Seif Kol Adayr, so what's going to happen to this neshama. I want right now. I am an Eved b'fnei hamelach, and there's something on my heart. Please remove it so I can serve you better. Putting his head between his knees was a sign of him removing all the Ruach HaKodesh from him. He bedafka wanted a limited perception so he can focus on the tzara at hand and say, Rabbeinu Shalom, I'm an Eved, I'm not a Tsar, ich weiß and garnish, all I know is please take away this problem. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai as Nasi couldn't do that. He didn't have the right to be misalik himself from his madrega. And therefore he saw that the tzara is good, so how could he be mispal? So perhaps we can suggest that that is umadir lo yereisim l'daber b'yavdi b'Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu had both miles. If he wanted, he was Moshe, and he saw everything at Seif Kol Adayr until Mashiach comes. But if necessary, he had all the miles of just b'avdi as well. After the Leviim had been assigned their tasks, they were not permitted to begin the service before undergoing a special dedication process. The process basically has 4 steps. They have to shave all their hair off. They have to be matayr themselves in tumas v'nes. On the 3rd and 7th day, to be sprinkled with the waters of the parah aduma. They have to offer the various different karbonos. And then the interesting one. They were waved. No, not waving in the context of waving a requirement, but waving in the literal manner. They were lifted and waved, the same way you would wave your lulav. Aaron HaKohen, as the representative of the Bnei Yisrael, lifted each individual Levi, all 22,000 of them, in one day. He lifted each Levi, waved him up and down, back and forth. The Rokeach says that the waving ceremony signified that Aaron had acquired the Leviim to assist him in the Avodah, in accordance with halacha, that you have to make a kinyan on something to really acquire it. If I wanted to acquire a watch, I would lift it. When you go to the Rav and you make a kinyan, when you sell your chametz, you may lift his hat. Even though these represent different kinds of kinyanim, but along these lines, Aaron HaKohen lifted each Levi, marking an official acquisition. Kairach wasn't all too excited about this. He used this as a pretext to argue against Moshe Rabbeinu. He claimed, or his wife claimed, that he was humiliated by this. But none of the Kairach made it sonnet for this waving. He went out and said, look what Moshe did. He brings his brother, and he waves us around as if he was some type of an animal. But the other Leviim didn't seem to mind. On the contrary, they viewed it as a schus. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz points out a Pella de Gazach. He says, this whole waving, just the physical effort over here that had to be exerted by Aaron HaKohen is mind-boggling. Aaron HaKohen is no young man now. I mean, he was 83 when the Yidden left Mitzrayim. And here he's given a job to lift 22,000 Leviim, not just lift them, but wave them in all directions, and he did this on one day. And we make a cheshbon, if this was through a 24-hour period even, it would be about one lady every 30 seconds straight for 24 hours. And if it was during a 12-hour period, it would be one lady every 15 seconds. I don't know how accurate my math is, but I think you get the idea that this was a nes nigla. So this is the pliya, says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. The whole mind was nice and easy. For Aaron to have the physical strength to be able to endure this, to be able to do this. And Korach saw this. He saw an open miracle. He saw an old man lift 22,000 people and wave them in one day. And Korach himself couldn't deny it. He was one of the people that was waved. Anyone who saw this would obviously say, I just saw a nes. I just saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a special Korach to Aaron HaKohen, l'mayla miderech hateva, l'mayla than any musik that is any shaychus to teva. And clearly that's what the other Leviim saw and felt after they were placed back down on the ground. But not Korach. Korach made a litzanis out of this. He laughed. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu must have made this up. It couldn't be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Aaron to do this. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz adds, in the Shira, we say, thanks to Hashem, that the generals of Edom were frightened. The Torah brings this as a chiddush. It's not the norm. Even if you see an open miracle, but if it goes against your objectives, you'll always figure out a teretz, not to be mispoiled by the miracle. This is part of the Shira. It was a mess. That the Alufi Edom was frightened and said, a nes, the Kadosh Baruch Hu is making miracles for Klal Yisrael. Normally it doesn't happen that way. Someone who is stooped in Litzanis, embedded in his own personal taiva, he laughs off miracle. He can see anything, it makes no relation on it. Now, we mentioned from the Nesiva Shalom last week in our Ein Yaakov segment that the Baron of Kolin had a special kayach to be machzor bali tshuva. Others did tshuva when they just heard his voice. Some had to actually hear what he had to say. And those who weren't moved by that, who are so completely ripped out of their shayish, that didn't affect them, sometimes the Baron of Kolin would just grab them and say, "Bis wie lang ist es valgren of der Welt?" For how long are you just going to roll in this world without any sense of direction? Wake up! Don't you realize life is not going to go on forever? That you have to get things straight and prepare for the world to come? And that shaking, that statement always did it. No one walked away without doing tshuva. But you have to be the Baron of Kolin. That was a mess. You have to be a tzaddik to be mashbiah that. You may go over and shake someone, and you may not necessarily get him to do tshuva. But there's a tremendous lesson over here. Because everyone gets shaken up in life. Everyone's cage is rattled from time to time, so to speak. One moment we think that we have everything planned out for the next 3 weeks. We have complete control of our destiny. Everything is within our grasp. I have a beferish, a Palm Pilot in my pocket that clearly spells out exactly where I'm going to be every single hour for the next 3 weeks. I have a schedule book over here in my pocket. It says exactly what I'm supposed to do. And if I'm going to change my schedule, it's up to me. And then, everyone has experienced this, suddenly something happens, and we don't know what the next minute is going to bring. So the Eibishter feed now Yiddish kinder, for better or for worse. And we're shaken. We don't like this. We like to know exactly what we're going to do on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Suddenly something happens that's out of our control, and we're not sure. Now, here's the catch. We don't plan on when we're going to be shaken up. We ought to be ready for it. Never live in an illusion that everything is guaranteed. But l'maisa, when it happens, we're shaken. What is perhaps more so up to us is our reaction to sometimes being lifted off our feet and shaken around a little. We can react like Korach, with anger. We can refuse to see the hashgacha in events that we may not necessarily like, and therefore react with litzanis, and throw off the yoke of Yiddishkeit, or find someone to become a scapegoat like Korach did. Use it as an excuse to vent frustrations that have long been harboring in our hearts.
And then the problem is one can wind up, chas v'shalom, where Kairach wound up. Or we can react the way the vast majority of the 22,000 Leviim did. They were placed back down on the floor, and they may have only had a second or two to say, "Thank you, Aaron HaKohen. I'm a different person now. I could have used that shaking. I realized now I have to reevaluate my life, reorganize my priorities. I have to understand why Kadosh Baruch Hu sent me down here in this world and prepare for the world to come, the real world." That's what the pasuk says after the waving. As a result of this waving, the Leviim were now committed to me. They were committed to our Kadosh Baruch Hu. They recognized the Koach of Aaron HaKohen and how they have to serve Klal Yisrael. They reevaluated their lives. They were different people when their feet touched the ground again. So how you Leviim? But that's our choice. We can't pick when we're going to be shaken up. But we could pick what that shaking is going to do to us. Rashi points out that the Torah repeats 3 times about the waving of the Leviim. First, in Kapitel Ches Pasuk Yud Aleph, "V'heinis aharenis Leviim tnufa lifnei Hashem me'es b'nei Yisrael v'hu laved es avodas Hashem." Then a second time in Pasuk Yud Gimel, "V'amarta es Leviim lifnei Aaron lifnei Banav v'heinafta esam tnufa l'Hashem." And a third time right after Sheni in Pasuk Tesvav, "V'yachichen yevayu halavim laved es oyel mohed v'tiharta esam v'heinafta esam tnufa." Why 3 times? So Rashi, the first waving described in Pasuk Yud Aleph, that refers to the Bnei Kahat. That's why it says "V'heinis aharenis halavim tnufa lifnei Hashem," because the Bnei Kahat were the ones who carried the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Aron, and the Shulchan as we discussed last week. They were the ones that were lifnei Hashem. So their tnufa, in a sense, lifted them to the highest level. The Bnei Kahat were brought lifnei Hashem. The second waving, the one described in Pasuk Yud Gimel, refers to the Bnei Gershon. Here it doesn't say lifnei Hashem, but it does say tnufa l'Hashem, because they also had avodas hakodesh. They carried the Uriyos, the Krosim, the special hooks of the Uriyos. So they weren't brought lifnei Hashem, but it still says tnufa l'Hashem. The third waving, the one in Pasuk Tezvav, says Rashi, that refers to the Bnei Merari. Over here it doesn't say Hashem's name at all. Not lifnei Hashem, not Hashem. It just says V'yachichen yevayu halavim labed es oyel moed v'tiharta oisem v'heinafta oisem tenufa. This refers to the Bnei Merari, who carries the kroshim, the most exterior aspect of the Mishkan. Still a tremendous level of kedusha beyond our understanding, but relative to the other 2 madrigos, it was the lowest level. Therefore, it doesn't say over here Hashem. Now, in regard to the other parts of the purification process that the Leviim had to go through, it's not broken up into 3 for Gershon, Kas, and Merari. How come Dafka over here by the Tenufa asks the Sefer Shem and Shmuel? Do we have 3 separate commandments for each of the sons of Levi? The Shem and Shmuel gets back to something we mentioned last week. In regard to the Bnei Kahat, it says Nasai, it's Rosh Bnei Kahat. So there's a kind of lifting to the Bnei Kahat. That's at the end of Pashas HaMikvah. At the beginning of Pashas Nasai, as we said last week, it says Nasai es Rosh Bnei Gershon, Gamheim. All right, Gamheim, them too. The them too makes them a shtickle tuffle. But Lamaisa, there is a Siyas Rosh even in regard to the Bnei Gershon. There's a lifting. By the Bnei Merari, we don't find the lashon of Nasai at all. So he brings from the Medrash that the Bnei Kahat had the Siyas Rosh Mitzat HaTorah. They carried the Aron. Moshe Rabbeinu comes from the Bnei Kahat. They represent the Bnei Gershon also had something to be proud of. They were the Bchar. Gershon was Levi's oldest son. But the Bnei Merari, they didn't have this Nasias Rosh. Now, it seems a little tough on the Bnei Merari. I mean, after all, why should the Bnei Merari, Levi's 3rd son, be any less than the rest of Klal Yisrael? In regard to all of Klal Yisrael, at the beginning of the Midbar, the pasuk says, "Su'u es rosh kol adas b'nei Yisrael." So all of Klal Yisrael, the Pshutei Ha'am, had the Siyas Rosh. Just Merari, the 3rd of Levi's son, shouldn't have. I mean, after all, they were still Leviim. They were still a cut above the rest. And the answer is, of course, the Bnei Merari were a cut above the rest. They were Leviim. But each of Levi's sons had a different tafkid in terms of what they had to teach Klal Yisrael. The Bnei Kahas taught Klal Yisrael to be proud of the Darkei Hashem Yisbarach, to give them chizuk, what it means for a yid to be zeicha to learn a daf Gemara, to support Torah, Hashem oiz liyam yitein. The assignment of the Bnei Gershon was to give Klal Yisrael chizuk in the mere fact that they are Yidden, Bnei B'chai Yisrael. The Bnei Merari had a different assignment. Adarab, the Bnei Merari were there to teach Klal Yisrael, but don't get too haughty. Don't confuse chizuk and being an Erlich Yid to personal gaiva. It shouldn't be ish kol yasha de'ena v'yasa. You have to be mevakel yourself to das Torah, or else you can go off the deep end thinking you're doing things l'Shem Shamayim. So it isn't that we're downgrading the Bnei Merari. The lack of the Siyas Rosh by the Bnei Merari isn't a chasarein, an inherent deficiency in the character of the Bnei Merari. Adarab, it just defines their assignment. That's the avodah of the yid. Sometimes you need chizuk to build yourself up. Go out and do that mitzvah. You know what you're going to accomplish, and then sometimes you need to be held back a little bit. Don't think you're so great. That's the v'hasa satan milsaneinu u'me'achreinu, which we discussed many times. There's a satan before you do a mitzvah that comes and says, you, what's the point of learning? You don't understand anything anyway. You engaging in chesed, what do you think you're going to accomplish? You're a shlamazel. You'll probably make things worse. So for this Yetzer Hara we say, Reishis davar v'yigva liba v'darkei Hashem. What a yid can accomplish with a mitzvah, we have no musik. After you do the mitzvah, the Yetzer Hara comes along and says, you're Mr. Great, you're so much better than that neighbor. That neighbor wouldn't do what you would do. So here, we fight this Yetzer Hara with, calm down. You know how much more you have to do? The Siyas Rosh is a wonderful thing. It motivates us to do mitzvahs. We should appreciate what a yid is. By the same token, if it goes too far, it leads to gayus or kas, so we need a little Bnei Merari over there to keep us in check. If you have too much Merari, you fall into a yish, a sense of hopelessness. What's the point of me doing anything? So then you need a little Gershon and Kahas to inject you, to give you chizuk, to encourage you. The Shem Shmuel says that was the inyan of the Tnufa. Aaron lifted each of the Levim and said, this is your avodah, this is your job. And here's exactly how far you have to go. And here's where you have to employ your method and your means. And that's why there is a chiluk amongst the Tnufas. Each mishpacha here, Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, had a different kind of Tnufa. The Abi Nezer said, everything has a cleat, everything has a shell. Even the best thing in the world has a shell around it. The shell around Torah is the possibility of becoming a Bal Gaiva. Thinking, I'm such a great Talmud Chacham, how dare that Amaris even sit next to me in shul. Yichus is a gewaldige Zach. The shell around Yichus is arrogance. What are those common people doing in my Medrash? Being down to earth, Merirus, is also important. Very important. A very necessary quality. But there's a klipa around that too, where a person can lose his self-esteem and fall into a yish, and he can say, I'm so simple, it's not worth it for me to do anything anyway. Aaron HaKohen took all of the Levim and he taught them exactly how to teach Klal Yisrael. Your job is to teach them, learn that black Gemara. Realize how great you are. Your job is to teach them you're a tremendous yid. Your job is to teach them that don't get carried away. Aaron HaKohen picked them up and told them, you go this way, you go that way, you go until here, you go until there. Everything fit in like a puzzle. And then Hanani was a different kind of waving. That's why it's broken up into three. Where he waved the B'nai Kahas, he didn't wave the B'nai Gershon. Where he waved the B'nai Gershon, he didn't wave the B'nai Merari. Each are different assignments. Each were sent in sort of different directions. Each was taught how to complement each other, to give Klal Yisrael overall direction and a balance, a sense of guidance. In a way, we go through this every Shabbos of the Shem Yishmor. Erev Shabbos is a b'china of Merari. Erev Shabbos you have to do tshuva. Erev Chanami you have to do Mekabel Shabbos Mitzvah Simcha, but you have to reevaluate your life. Friday night, we're B'nai Gershon. We throw off the Tirdas HaMalacha, we forget about our Panasa, and we feel the incoming Kedusha of Shabbos. How lucky we are to be a Yid and have Shabbos. Shabbos by day is a b'china of the B'nai Kahas, the Koyach HaTorah. Chazal will convey the Shiurim for Shabbos by day. We learn a black Gemara, Shabbos before davening, that's Matayar us, Tzadikim said. Shabbos itself is the tenufa for every Yid. Every Yid is a Levi. The Rambam says any Yid that's mechanech his children, that looks to help others, automatically has a pchina of the Kiddush of Leviah. That's why the mechalim of Shabbos don't schlep a person into Gashmis, like the Arizal says. Because the whole Shabbos is off the ground. It's how we are lifted by Shabbos, weighed and directed.
This shiur is distributed by Koladas, 11 Stay Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.